Welcome along to Man in the Mirror. It's Hayden Williams here, and as I said in the introduction, my guest this week is the creative director of Ghawali Fragrances. It's Forat Al Haider. Forat, how are you?
I'm honestly great. It's a pleasure to speak to you, and we've been wanting to do this for some time, so I'm very, very excited about this.
We have, yeah, me too. And I should explain, we met at a Ghawali event in Selfridges a couple of months ago when I was introduced to the brand. I have to say, it wasn't a brand I knew, so it was a great opportunity to see the brand in all its glory in a really great pop up at Selfridges, and that's where it resides currently. And then we had the good fortune to run into each other at Pitti for Granze as well in Florence. And I'm going to put all the links to where you can find out more about Ferrat and the brand. But if you do follow him, you'll see he's a man that's on a mission and traveling the world, preaching the good word of Hawali as creative director and managing director. But there's so much going on with the brand, which we will definitely get into because it's a brand with some fragrances I've really fallen in love with, and I think it's this fascinating intersection between Western perfumery and obviously its roots being in Dubai and the Middle East, which so we will talk about in a bit more depth. But I'd love to start off for that, and I'm always really fascinated by how and why people get interested in the world of fragrance, and I wonder what it meant to you as a younger man. Was it something, is it part of the culture more for young men to have an interest in fragrance? Was it you in particular? Because I know you've had a European and a Middle Eastern upbringing.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for that introduction. I think that was a very, very nice introduction, honestly, and thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. I mean, first of all, what I love about what your podcast and a bit before we spoke is that I really feel like I can speak super freely, and let it just
Yeah.
the conversation flow. I think from before, I'm not a guy who likes to receive like questions and read and prepare as well. So that's what I appreciate about your podcast as well. I mean, for me, to tell people a little bit more, I'm originally Iraqi. My parents are Iraqi. They left Iraq in the 70s. I am born and raised in Sweden, so I spent my youth in Sweden. So, talking about fragrances, Sweden is not necessarily the highest consumption of fragrances in the world. They
Yeah.
don't have that skin, let's say, they don't have that fragrance approach that we tend to do in the Middle East and also the rest of the world. They're very much like about skincare,
Yeah.
smelling neutral, smelling clean, smelling like air, and that's something that I'm also very, very fascinated by. But me as a kid growing up, and I think the story goes a little bit back to my father, and I was very much impressed by my father because my father used to travel. Was a businessman as well. Used to travel quite a lot, and he was always dressed in a suit, like a spot on
Was
suit.
he?
Yeah, and it was always like Hugo Boss suits, and my father, we're talking about like 90s Hugo Boss suit, always like in a tie as well, and his mustache looked like an Arabic Secret Service agent as well. So and I remember like every time he used to like the final touch he used to do was to put on the perfume, and he
Yeah.
used to have those Hugo Boss perfumes. Even I
Yes.
remember one of the perfumes that I still have. I always need to have it, even though I don't use it on a daily basis. Was Dunhill Desire,
Oh
and
yeah.
those
I
classic
love some
ones
of
as
ththe
well.
Dunhill fragrances. I was the
Exactly,
same in the 90s. I was in those.
exactly. And then I used to always like watch him do that final touch of the perfume. And after he leaves, I used to go back in and sneak in and just like, and then he always knew that he always like looked at me and he always knew, but we never spoke about it. But he knew that I knew that he knew that I knew, but it was like one of those things as well. But I think that was my one of my earliest introductions to to perfumes and scents. And another thing as well is that I grew up with back then there wasn't that much of an Arabic community in Sweden, so I grew up with my aunts, cousins as well. I think I'm blessed with a very high number of cousins as well, like 100
Yeah.
something. So so we grew up all together as well. And one of the things that I noticed as well from childhood was the spices, the scents from the homes when you're cooking, and also using a little bit more perfumes that you're used to as well. But I remember like specifically also like tea, and how tea was so
Yes.
essential to us, the
Yeah.
cardamom. And honestly, like I'm saying this, but I actually have cardamom in my pocket because we always
Do
like
you?
chew it. We always chew it like chewing gum as well,
Yeah.
and it just refreshes as well. And it's part of those cultural things. So for me, it was like very much about like colliding cultures coming together. And rather than resisting and fighting it, you just saw the beautiful blend in between them. And,
Yeah,
and that's what,
bring it
from a young
together.
age brought me. Exactly. So that's
Yeah.
like my earliest days, I would say, in scents and what made me attracted to scents. And even like going to my friends' homes or wherever, like I was the only one with like 12 perfumes while I was like 12, 13, because I started collecting them.
Right. And where were you in Sweden, Farad?
So I'm born and raised in a small town. It's a university town called Lund, which is just famous for its university in South Sweden,
Right.
and quite close to Malmö and Copenhagen. So even when I
Right.
fly to Copenhagen. I just take the train for like 30 minutes to go back home to Lund.
And
It's a very
were you
old
there
town as
because
well.
of your father's work?
I mean, it's a mix of everything. Like when they left Iraq in the 70s, my father was also a teacher, lecturer as well in English and
Yeah.
Arabic. So he lived in different countries as well. So they lived in Syria, they lived in Libya back then, and then to Yemen, and then Syria again, and then Hungary, and then Sweden. So
Right.
he very well traveled as well. But my father always had a passion for traveling, even since, like, I think my father is the only Iraqi I've heard that went backpacking in Europe in the 60s with his uncles. So it was like
Yeah.
always like an exploring of different cultures and seeing different things as well.
And I suppose there's no surprise then that you've taken the mantle and working with fragrance and business and travel, all these things being a big part of your life. And when it came to you going into the world of work, were you drawn immediately to this world of luxury and fragrance, or were there stepping stones along the way?
I mean, I actually did my bachelor's and I finished my master's even when I was 21. And my master's was from Lund University because it's the most famous university as well, my hometown.
Mm,
My studies was actually, my master's is in globalization, brand creation, and consumer culture theories.
right.
And I think one of the few people who actually work exactly in what I studied. So I'm blessed with
Yeah.
that as well. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't hear that very often, but one of the key things that I always wanted at a very young age is I wanted to work either in the entertainment, fashion, beauty, or sports industry. Like these were I wanted to do all of these things. And I've always been a huge football fan as well. So
Mm,
I was always trying to find certain ways where I can work in these things because even from a very young age, I realized that if I start a career within something that I don't like, and within 3 years I'm still in that career, I'm probably going to get stuck there for another 30 years. So it's very
yeah.
important for me to choose and to really make sure that we get that. And then I think that I was actually talking to my friend back in the days. There's this American show that I used to watch when I was studying as well in high school called Entourage. And
Oh, I
Entourage
loved
was,
Entourage.
you
Yeah,
remember that show, right?
I do. Yeah.
And with what was his name? Vince Chase? Was that his
Vinny
name?
Chase. Vinny
Vinny
Chase.
Chase,
Yeah.
and his crew and everything. And
Yeah.
I was like, Sweden is very small, and let's not forget that I'm from a very small city in a small country as well. I'm not from New York. I'm not from London. I'm not
Mm,
from Madrid. And I realized that if I want to have that super actionist lifestyle where they like take a flight here, they have to do that. There's different type of work every day. I realized that I need to get an education quite fast, a very strong education. And further than that, I just really need to make sure that I start working in an industry that allows me to be that kind of lifestyle. So that was one of my main inspirations because I knew I'm not an actor, like I'm not a model, like I'm not going to be able to do that. So I need to like find a way to live that kind of lifestyle.
yeah. So it was quite an intentional thing then that you saw the lifestyle and the kind of world you wanted to inhabit and sort of took a path towards it. And I suppose business and was Chalhoub Group the your first employer employer, sorry, or did you work for other people before?
I mean, the thing is, like, I always had a dream to come to Dubai, and my two brothers had
Did
just
you?
moved. And yeah, I mean, especially because when we're talking about mixing the cultures, that was so important for me. And also, like, I believe that Dubai could allow me to be super European whenever I wanted to, and also be super Arab whenever I wanted to. And the funny
Mm,
thing is, like, just for you to know, Hayden, like, as a joke, of course, it's not something that, people take super seriously. But what people always say is that, in Sweden, I was never the Swedish guy. Then I went to the Arab world and I was never the Arab guy because I was the Swedish guy. So I'm like, can you
yeah.
guys just decide on who I am as well? And that's why for me, it was so important to find that culture fit where I could be both at the same time because
Right.
I'm born and raised in Sweden, but I also have this cultural appreciation for my family heritage and my roots as well. So I actually like I got my that's why I finished my master's super fast. I wanted to get done, and I remember even the university they were like, we were thinking about you doing your PhD here because you're 21 years old with masters. I was like, They're
No,
like, why?
I'm
I was
done.
like, the whole idea is to I don't want to be stuck here.
Yeah.
But I absolutely love Sweden. Super grateful and blessed. And to be honest with you, like when I say I'm going to Scandinavia, I actually say home
Yeah.
because that's where I grew up.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Dubai, I was working as an intern in a media agency in their strategy department, and it was supposed to be 6 months. And after 3 months, I got called into the HR's office. They're like, we want to offer you this job, and I was like, the media agency. I'm not sure if that's where I want to be in the future, media buying, whatever. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'll think about it. And in my head, I was always like, no. And literally, as I closed, like literally closed the door to that HR, I got a call. I was like, hello. I was like, hi, it's the Chalhoub Group. Do you want to come for an interview? And that was like
Really.
12 years ago, yeah, something like that. When they
And
say like when a door closes, that was
yeah,
literally it.
I mean, he was the literal sense of it. And
Yeah.
we've mentioned the Chalhoub Group a few times, and it might not be the most familiar to
Of
the
course.
listeners. It would be great if you could just sketch out a bit about the group and what it does.
Yeah, I mean, the Chalhoub Group is a family owned business that started in the 50s in Syria. And it is the main partner for luxury in beauty, fashion, and gifts across the whole Middle East. The head
Right.
office is in Dubai as well. We operate in joint venture, franchise business, retail business, distribution business, and where we also create our own brands as well, whether it's in concepts, department stores, retail stores as well. But it's a very, very big partner of LVMH, and also like there's certain partnerships with L'Oreal, with Estée Lauder, with Puig as well. So the biggest ones as well in fashion and beauty as well, and it's just it's a blessing to be surrounded by those creative people. And it's probably have shaped me for who I am. I've been there for 12 years.
Yeah.
I literally just turned 34, so you can imagine like how long I've been there as well. And
Yeah.
for me, it's also like a place where you have a lot of family values because I've seen the family and the generations. And if you spot them in the street, you wouldn't even notice that these are the Sharouk family because they're so humble and honest and transparent. And unfortunately and unfortunately, I must say, they become like family. So you
Yeah.
run the extra 500 miles, even though you're actually an
Yeah.
employee there, but you feel like you're really, really part of something bigger.
And they're still very much involved in the day-to-day running of the group now, are they?
They are 100% involved as well.
So what you have as part of the group, as you've explained, is all these other brands. But I guess it brings us to Hawali because there's an opportunity with that kind of retail distribute and all your distribution channels to come up with your own brands. So tell us a bit about Hawali because I say that I fell in love with it in Selfridges, and I think there's this beautiful range of fragrances that where ingredients are absolutely at the forefront, but it's some of the ingredients that showcase the best of the Middle East, isn't it? So, and you've told me so many fascinating stories about some of the raw materials and in all of the range. And yeah, I guess it's some ingredients that we're not always as familiar with in the Western markets, but there's so many beautiful ingredients in that part of the world, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And just to mention, like, so, as a group, we've been the main, let's say, ambassadors, translators, partners for luxury for such a long time. And, one of the key things, and this is why I really, really respect the Chalhoub Group, is that they wanted to give back to the region. They wanted to
Yeah,
give back to the culture of the region. And for them, it was so, so important. So that's why they created the brand called Ghawali. And Ghawali actually means something precious. And the whole idea was to give something back as a
right.
gift to the region as well. And let's be very honest. When you have all the brands that are the biggest brands, in your portfolio, do you actually need a brand like this? Probably not. But it's just the love that they have for the culture and the region as well that made them, really, really move forward with this. And I actually have some of my bottles here that we created. So I actually create, the perfumes. However, I'm not a nose. Like the noses
Yeah,
are for Manish. I have an
right.
amazing, amazing team that tells, like translates my stupid, crazy ideas into amazing events and,
Yeah,
marketing and everything as well. But just to tell you a little bit more, because I do the initial mixes, the first, the second, the third, before it goes to the chemical lab and the experts, of course. But as the bottle looks like this, and even the way it has the infinity sign. But the reason why it's also like designed like this, it stands for Arabic, contemporary, and niche. And the whole idea is that we wanted
Right.
to really make sure that everything fits into that, because what we've realized as well is that a lot of the Arabic brands tend to be quite fitted within a certain box, which is quite a lot, black and gold, a
Yeah.
lot of oud and vanilla as well, and we'll get to that when we talk about the ingredients as well.
Mm.
But we didn't feel like someone's really portraying the region in a new way, which is the real way of our younger consumers as well. Because when you look at our consumers, we are very like super proud of our heritage as well, but at the same time we're also very inspired by the rest of the world. I mean, you probably know when you go into Selfridges or the key department stores across the world, you see a lot of our consumers there, of course.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and, and we're very, very like hybrid, I would say, as well in our approach. So we wanted to create something that really tells the culture in a new and modern and innovative way, but at the same time still staying true to our roots and heritage as well. So that's why even the brand is called Ghawali, but the reference names are like Midnight Noise, Tea House Memoirs, Nomadic Dreams, Musical Vibrations. There's a lot of storytelling, untold, bottled emotions that we just
Yeah.
launched now. And one of the key things that you mentioned is also the ingredients, and it goes
Mm.
back to I would say a much bigger conversation about why even my finance team always tells me like, Forat, you have a very expensive taste. But one of the key things with ingredients as well is that
Okay. Guilty.
um,
Guilty. Guilty.
yeah, I mean, like fraud, like people don't spend this much on ingredients when you buy the juices. I was like, yeah, but we do. But like it goes into a lot of things as well when it comes to the ingredients. And one of the key things that I always have to tell a lot of people, also like internationally, because like you mentioned, we travel quite a lot. People like, for example, they think that oud is something that grows in Dubai. It actually doesn't. It's actually mostly coming from India, Cambodia, Thailand as
Yep.
well. But there's a lot of ingredients that have been famous because of the heritage of the Silk Roads as well, where certain ingredients tend to come to this region as well. So you always have like the classical oud or musk or amber. But one of the key things that we focused on a lot on Ghawali was that people always had this, and I'm talking to you about like 3 4 years back. People always had this idea that when you smell an Arabic brand, it's just gonna smell like raw oud and a little bit of vanilla. So I noticed
Yeah.
as well, like when we were trying to present our, people are like, taking 3 steps back, and that's why it became so important to us to really create a storytelling journey. That's number one. The second thing was also to create like real stories, and I create the stories. And other than that, also use amazing ingredients. Now when it comes to the ingredients, the key thing for me was that because of all the other Arabic brands, they smell just like oud. My mission was to create super strong, not in terms of oud, but strong, floral, fresh, long lasting scents.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be in your face, but they need to be long lasting, because in this region, Middle East, people thought that, oh, a fresh perfume is going to evaporate in 50 degrees of heat in 5 minutes. But that was our mission, to really create, you know, fresher, long lasting, but also certain stronger perfumes without necessarily always just throwing in oud, oud, oud. We have certain,
Yeah.
certain references that are more on the heavier side, but we don't use oud very much. And that's when we realized that we have a differentiation point when it comes to the storytelling, the design, the artistic approach, the ingredients, but also staying away from the natural stigma that we're seeing across the whole Middle East and also globally.
I think you touched on, well, so much of that was really interesting, but I think that's probably where it's slightly easier for some the Western taste to tap into that niche idea, because it definitely felt distinct, because as you said, there's so much narrative and storytelling with the brand, and you talked to me about some of the inspirations for some of the fragrances, and that's followed through into the point of sale and the beautiful bottles and the design. It does feel very modern. It does feel very niche in its approach, because it's, as you say, there's beautiful ingredients, but it's not just saying here's a bunch of really powerful ingredients in a bottle. Like there is a journey to go on, and a story that evolves. And I think the some of the visuals that were on the screen in Selfridges, it did feel very cool, very modern, very much about a sort of young perspective from that region, which I hadn't necessarily seen before, and it felt really fresh and innovative.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, we like, and this goes down to the marketing team. I have to like give them a lot of credit because, you know, Arabic brands, if you go a few years back, their events were literally like come to the store for some Arabic coffee and dates. And you know, we were very much like, nah, you know, and we brought in like DJs. We had like huge parties, events, but the most important thing was the storytelling, you know,
Yeah.
and telling the culture from a different perspective. And this is why, like for example, I was just spraying like now Tea House Memoirs, which is the whole story of Tea House Memoirs goes back to us. That's, and we actually got it from the Brits. If you actually go back like 100 years, tea is so essential, so
Yes.
essential to our culture. We drink tea from morning till night. There's always tea in holidays, festivities, and everything. And I wanted to celebrate that culture in a new way, and that's why we created Tea House Memoirs. You know, where the top note is just black tea, because we always say that if our tea is not as black as our oil, we don't want it. And even it goes back to my heritage with my grandmother when she used to like pour us tea, and she used to always put cardamom in the tea. Like that's something quite unique for us.
Yeah.
So these are the storytelling things that we focused a lot on, and that's why we managed to go and reach out to a younger audience, as you mentioned. Like our average age is around 28 to 30, which is not
Is it?
quite common for Arabic niche brands as well. But we
Yeah.
took it as a mission all the way from ingredients to the storytelling. But like I said, even in terms of the events, to really tell a story in a different way. And it all goes back to the fact that we're part of the Chalhoub Group. We already have those kind of brands. So if we want to do something, let's do it differently.
Yeah. And I suppose that the other advantage of being part of the group is almost seeing the best practice and getting a sense of what those other brands are doing. And certainly not that you need to just copy it, but it's almost like what the standard is, and that can fuel your inspiration, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, and even further than that, before I joined, like started this journey in beauty innovation, I was actually looking after business development brand acquisition. So
Right.
I went from being sent two niche brands a month into seeing five niche brands a week. And so I started like really seeing it. And a lot of my, colleagues are actually like team members that I worked with from my business development days. So we know
Yeah.
exactly what retailers want to see. We know what distributors want to hear. We know what works. We also know this is a cheap pump. This is an expensive pump. So we got that insights in a way before. But like you
Yeah.
mentioned as well, being part of a big group, you also get a lot of, um, let's say, behind the scenes of seeing certain things. But also, Hayden, being super honest with you, we don't have this thing where you do someone a favor because it's your own brand. Like I have to
Right.
fight for my retail space the same way that some of my favorite brands like Frederic Malle and Kilian has to. And I also
Yeah.
get compared a lot to saying that, oh, you have a pop-up here. Last month we had our own brand Dior there or Chanel there. Like how do you perform versus them? And I remember once we beat them in a small thing, and then our CEO was very much like, are you going to beat them everywhere now? I was like, I mean, it's quite tough to do that, but that's what
Steady,
I mean as
steady,
well, is
steady.
that you get the behind the scenes, but you don't get any favors when it comes to your performance. You're actually compared to that. And it's one of the conversations I had with our president for the vertical, Michael Chalhoub, where I told him that when you are used to buying Figo and Zidane, it's very different from when you have to create Messi from scratch. And that's one of the things I had to
That's a
explain
nice
to him.
analogy.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, you can buy whoever you want, but to create this, you need youth coaches, like training pitches. Like
Yes.
it's a different
Yeah.
thing,
Got to
and we don't.
build it from the ground up. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's one of the things. But even like we use a lot of football analogies, and he's a big Arsenal fan. And I
Good. I
always tell
like to
him
hear
that,
it.
yeah. I mean, I actually like recently we had also had a conversation that we have now reached the stage where we qualified for the Champions League. And if you want to reach that next step and next step and next step, there's a lot of work to be done as well. And it's fun to use those kind of football analogies, but like I said, we're not being done any favors. I have to fight for the same retail space,
Well, I think
like
that's
everyone
it's
else.
sort of good to hear that in a way, because,
Of
as you say,
course.
the ultimate arbiter of these things is, do customers buy it? Are people, are people actually taking an interest and willing to spend money on Hawali, and it you know it's great to hear that they are. And when you do a pop up, that it's responding really well. One of my favorites, as you know, Forat, is Four Walls, which I think is such a stunning fragrance with the ginger and the pepper, and it does, as you say, there's this power to it without it being a kind of over oody. It does it gives me this kind of strength, and there's the leather and the vetiver. I love it. I wonder what was your inspiration with Four Walls?
I mean, it's actually funny. Like I know how much you love that perfume. It's actually
Yeah,
one
I
of my
do.
favorite creations. But I just love that you love it in a podcast also called Man in the Mirror, and also where you're based as well, because it just fits the story perfectly. And I'll tell you. So, I mean, I was really like, I don't really believe in like, female and male oriented scents, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Because, like I said, I want to make like fresh, long lasting, and stronger perfumes for the Middle East where they're not used to that as well. I tend to use a lot of floral in my perfumes, and I use it myself as well because
mm.
people have this mindset that floral, no, like, but there's a whole composition of creating a perfume. And for this perfume, I was very inspired by I think it was like Guy Ritchie and the Gentleman movie
Oh
before
yeah,
the series came out. Before the
yeah,
series came out, it was a movie, and I just like had this vision of those Lord Mansion estates in the UK where it's very much leathery and something very elegant as well, and you
yeah.
just see those
Like those beautiful sort of gentlemen's clubs with wood panelled walls and all that,
and also
cigars.
like exactly, and the barber jackets and the dogs and the Land Rovers, and I had also watched a lot of like The Crown. I'm not gonna lie to you, and for me it was like very like very much in that mood, and I wanted to do something which is with one of my favorite ingredients, ginger. But I love Nigerian ginger because it's very very feisty. I'm a huge fan of pink pepper as well, um, and then I wanted something that has vetiver as well to give you that woody notes as well. And I used two
Yeah,
different types of vetiver, and then I wanted to use leather, but I wanted wood leather to make it quite distinct and aromatic as well, and very very spicy. But I was actually mixing this in the office, and at that time, in the office we had those glass doors, and I had my headphones in, and one of the things I appreciate about podcasts as well is of course the link to music, and I really play on music and poetry quite a lot.
mm.
And I was listening to the song, and he says, "Four walls won't hold you down tonight." And while I was mixing it, and it's a song Human Nature, and I was like mixing it,
Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah.
and he says, "Four walls won't hold you down tonight." And as I did that, my head of operations, Eli, just like knocked on the door. He's like, "Whatever you're mixing, we can smell it all the way out there. It's so powerful." And it was Four
Right.
Walls with the song, with that mindset that I was like, this perfume is called Four Walls. There's no way the other way around it. And it's one of those things where things just click all together,
Yeah,
And
like
and then we
synchronicity.
added a little bit, that simplicity as well. But that's why it's called Four Walls. And I remember that my older brother, we were in London actually on Oxford Street, and a lot of the perfumes I use, and people are like, "Oh my god, you smell so nice. What is it?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm working on something." And we were in London, and he was like, "What's this perfume?" I was like, "Try it." It was a sample. He's like, "Shh, shh, shh." And he was like, "Oh, nice." He's not very much of a fragrance guy, to be honest. He likes the super fresh fragrances. And
Mm.
then we were in the Oxford Street, and when the buses just goes by you and that wind just comes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I was standing behind him, and I was like, "Oh my god, that smells really nice." So on purpose, and he's even like I'm like 189, 188. He's like 191, so he's even taller than me. And he was like he walks much faster, and even like my dad always says like, "Why are you walking as if you're on a mission? Like chill, calm down." And he
Maybe
was
he
walking
is
like 1 meter ahead of me, and on purpose, I started slowing down, and I could just smell it coming off
enjoying the sillage.
yeah, and I was like, "Oof, this perfume," and that's when we launched Four Walls, and then going back to the unisex and blurred lines as well when it comes to fragrance, and I felt that this perfume might be maybe 60% more male, especially in the Middle East. And then I remember when we launched it in a huge, beautiful event in Saudi Arabia, these ladies coming up to me saying, "This is my scent, this is my scent, this is my scent," and
Really?
I was like, oh, and it was quite interesting to see that as well. Now we also know, like from intelligence patterns, that certain, men tend to use more female scents to attract, and females tend to use more male to attract, or whatever. And but I just felt that we finally reached the stage where it's not like leather men only, floral
Yeah,
only
of
female,
course.
and I just love that.
Yeah, I love that. Isn't it? It's always really interesting to me. When a creator has a certain vision in mind, but once it's actually out in the market and it's a real tangible thing, the way that people receive it and who receives it, you kind of have no influence over that anymore, and it's always fascinating. If I was to ever create a fragrance, it comes from my lens and it comes from all my experiences, and this is what's happened with something like Four Walls. It's almost a kind of tribute to the British sensibility, but you bring all of yourself and you bring your European background, you bring everything from the Middle East, and they do become stories, don't they, in bottles, I think. And
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
personal, but then you give it out to the world, and it's yeah, I think it's a
I
beautiful
mean,
thing.
you're absolutely right, and just to give you another one, which is actually one of our top sellers. Midnight Knows and Musical Vibrations are top sellers, and Musical
Right,
Vibrations won the best fragrance in GQ magazine 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And
great.
Musical Vibrations, and going back to what you said, it literally started from a lunch conversation where we were joking when you put our Spotify, like with my team, when you put it on shuffle, we said that it's very bipolar. I went from
Yeah,
Jay-Z, Kendrick Lamar to Abdul Abdullah. A lady in our team went from Taylor Swift to Nancy Ajram, and I was like, this is actually funny how it's very bipolar, and it's funny. And one of the things I was telling my team that Timbaland, the producer Timbaland, I was like, he used a lot of Arabic beats from the 50s and the 60s in his
yeah,
songs.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I was telling them, they were like, yeah, really? I was like, yeah. I mean, one of the most famous Jay-Z songs is actually Abdul Halim Khosara from like the 60s. And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, I mean, even his beats for like Aaliyah was actually Arabic songs.
yeah.
And we were like, we
And
need
I
to
think one of
celebrate
the
this.
Nelly Furtado ones. There's a isn't Man Eater's
Exactly.
got sort of some
Yeah.
sort of Arabic
I remember which
sample.
one it was. If it was, yeah, maybe it was Maneater actually. But it's just like how beautiful cultures collide. And I was like,
Yeah,
we need to celebrate this a little bit more. So we wanted to capture that joy when how you guys, for example, in the West, they're called songwriters.
mm,
In our part of the world, they're actually called poets. So they're celebrated even more.
right.
So it says poetry by, singing by, composition by, and they're very, very much celebrated. And for me, it was very important that I wanted to capture that joy that music gives you when the beat hits your heart and you get that vibration. So that's why the perfume is called Musical Vibrations. But going back to the ingredients, and I needed to think about like how do we collide this with the cultures. And one of the few examples is that it's a very fresh perfume, and it's also a floral perfume, but we have actually oak moss, and this oak moss is very much my heritage in Sweden. The oak
Mm,
moss that you have there, especially when it rains on the oak moss and it becomes a bit damp as well. But you have a lot of ingredients. But then in the end, to bring it back to the Middle East, we added frangipani flowers from Dubai, and people use that flower quite often. But the one from Dubai is quite uncommon to use because it's quite difficult to work with. And the whole idea was to go there, go here, and put it back together. And one of the
yeah,
crazy things about my marketing team is that when we did the event, they're like, "So how do we combine these two worlds?" I was like, "You guys do your magic. You guys know what I want, but you guys fix it."
yeah,
So we actually took a rooftop and we had a party there. So when the Arabic singer was singing, we were actually like showing like all screens were like videos of Elvis Presley, Beatles,
great.
Drake, to J. Cole, and to all those videos. And then when we got the international DJ, the screens automatically shifted to really old Arabic songs, videos from the 50s and 60s as well, just to
Love it.
show that crash course. And it
Yeah,
gave me kind of like Jay Z, Linkin Park, that album where they crashed with each
yeah,
other as well, and I
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
loved it.
The fusing of the world. It's funny, and it made me think of another Swedish perfumer who's now based in London. I don't know if you're familiar with this, called Maya Njai, and she grew up in Sweden. She has Gambian heritage as well. Now lives in London, but again, very autobiographical in her fragrances, and a lot of the kind of oak moss and the spices of food in Sweden, then some of her African heritage as well, and then everything about being in East London. And I just love that about perfume, that it can be beautifully autobiographical, but then it's something that you can share with the world, and I can take something different from it, and everyone else can. It's something that then becomes mine, doesn't it? It belongs to the wearer, and we put our own stories upon it, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, and I really thank you for saying that, because one of the key things I always tell my team and even our management is that, Ghawali is a brand which is a platform for the community. And, at first when I was saying it, they're like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't want to work with big agencies. I want to find young photographers who are TikTokers, whatever, YouTubers.
Yeah,
Let them shoot for us, and when we did an event somewhere, I was like, let us collaborate with this rug designer to do that collaboration for us specifically here. Let us work with this music producer to design a sleeve for musical vibration. And the whole idea was to really put the culture out there on the map and have it as a community where we allow
yeah,
people to participate. And that for me is bringing a lot of people together. And also in the Middle East, there's so many different nationalities and cultures here, and everyone's being celebrated. Even looking at my windows, I think there was like Diwali recently, and there's a lot of like different cultures and everything, and allowing that, let's say, fusion between different people and cultures and
yeah,
ideas come together is so beautiful. And then
yeah,
also like allowing us to share it with people who kind of like tap into it in their own way and let it fit into their lifestyle is something that I absolutely love.
yeah.
And other than that as well, scents and perfumes, and it brings up memories. It brings you back stories. It takes you to
Absolutely.
locations and destinations. Just two small examples. We launched our perfume Midnight Noise, which is one of my
Mm,
personal favorites. And Midnight Noise was literally me overthinking at midnight. And even I heard a poetic text and then I reached home at around like 12:10, I think, and I wrote in my notebook, nothing is louder than overthinking at midnight. And I was telling the story to this, young lady in I think it was in Kuwait. And I started like looking at her, she started tearing up, and she was like, you just made me feel the warm embrace of my mother who passed away a few years ago. And I was like,
oh
okay, that's not
gosh.
what I intended, but you could just see how powerful it is. And
Yeah,
and also another thing as well that I realized, and it goes back to all the things that you mentioned with the travels, is that nowadays I like to travel to a destination and have one perfume with me, whether it's a Ghawali perfume or any of my favorite brand perfumes. But I like to associate that city with a specific scent. So when I
right.
travel, I don't bring like 20 like before. I have like two, so I can because I stay away quite
So
a
that
lot
can be the
nowadays. So
scent of that place. Yeah,
exactly. But what I also realize is that, a lot of people with their partners, they have a common scent that makes them feel, closer together. So I actually created a scent, and I think you were among the first ones to see it in Pity as well.
yes, yeah,
It's called Closer Apart. And the reason for that is because I also wanted a scent that celebrates when you and your partner are there, but also when you guys are apart from each other, the specific scent brings you closer, even though you're apart. And, having that connection as well, like you mentioned as well, to time, locations, people as well, and connecting the dots, allowing you to, explore different cultures is what I really, really love about this industry. And even like, if you remove Ghawali to the side, that's what I absolutely love about other brands that tells you like these kind of stories of places that you haven't been,
yeah.
connections that you haven't seen, songs that you haven't felt or heard before. That's what I absolutely love about this industry.
Totally. Me too. Well, look, Farat, we will return to Hawali in a little while, but as always on the podcast, I'm interested in the guests' morning and evening routines and maybe some of the products that they enjoy using. I'm sure in your role at the Chalhoub Group, you get to experience lots of different products. You've already talked about some of the brands that you get to work with, and the fact that you've been in the innovation space. So I wonder what kind of routine you have in the morning and evening. Is it quite a tight edited routine, especially when you're traveling?
I mean, I love to have a routine, and you know how, you know, we have an Arabic saying that says "routine qatil," which is like a deadly routine, which puts the negative emphasis on
Yeah,
how a routine makes you slow and whatever. But I always try to tell people like it's really up to you if you want to make a routine boring and slow or fun, actually. And for me, like I started seeing different routines that different routines that actually becomes part of your life that allows you to have your own space. That's
Yeah,
like me time. Even if it's not like that 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, it's just that it's your me time. And it's up to you whether you want skincare to be a chore or whether you actually want to enjoy your skincare. You know what I
I
mean?
totally agree.
So,
Yeah, it's how
I
you
mean,
frame it, isn't it? I think.
it's really up to you. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
for an example, like I'm gonna give you a few examples. Like if we start with the morning, of course, I wake up, I brush my teeth. Coming from Sweden, brushing your teeth is like super essential. It's like you can brush your teeth like 5 times, and even the technique of how to brush your teeth and everything doesn't
Is it? Is
have
that a
like it.
particularly Swedish thing?
I mean, maybe it's a Swedish thing, but we're taught like from a very early age in Sweden how to brush our teeth. Not
Really?
straight, angle, and then it doesn't help when you have like four cousins who are doctors and dentists. So it's part of like I think the family as well. Now, I mean, and then afterwards, I really want to make sure like I really wash my face properly because I have this mentality and maybe it comes from my father's suits and whatever, but I think I have also have this feeling that if you look good, you feel good. If you feel good, you perform
Mm.
good. If you perform good, you will connect. Da, da, da. Like I always feel like that's important. Even in COVID, when we were working from home, I used to literally like still make sure I fix my hair, put some perfume on, and because I just that's what I need from myself. Maybe
Yeah.
people tend to call me a little bit peculiar in that aspect, but I need it for
No, I
myself.
think that was very common in lockdown, wasn't it? People sort of fell back into they needed those things to feel normal, to
To get
make
up.
sure they were still well groomed, and that moment of self care, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, so I also like I wash my face, of course. I tend to use skincare, of course. I've been a fan of, for many years of brands like The Ordinary and Inkilist as well with their
Yep,
serums. What I love about them is that they're very straight to the point.
they
Also
are.
affordable as well. They don't cost
They
like
are.
five
Yeah.
hundred dollars, for something. They're also easy to travel with because I travel quite a lot, so they're quite easy as well. I like to use these kind of serums that just like flow into your skin as well. One thing to remember is that when I was in Sweden, my skin tended to be quite dry, but when I moved to
Mm.
Dubai, I could feel that my skin was getting quite oily because of the humidity and the heat as well. So I
Yes.
really like to use
Yeah.
them. Then in terms of routine, I actually like to iron my clothes, and it's one of the things that I do myself and
Yep.
my family, and not just my father. It was very much like if you're 6 years old and you don't know how to iron, you're not a man. It was like okay, so
It's
so
good.
like we
It's a
were
good
like
life lesson.
like we learned how to like iron everything and how your pants have to have like a sharp line in the middle as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was one of our family ways of having discipline from a young age as well. So actually I like to take that moment to iron my own things as well.
Hmm.
Making sure that I iron as well, and that's why when I travel, it's like, oh, we have a steamer. I'm like, the steamer does not work in the same way, my love.
Not the same.
Um,
And
no,
what
and
about
then
grooming for that? What about the beard? You've got a good sharp beard. Do you do that yourself? Do you go to a barber?
funny that you ask because actually I think I slipped up with my razor just there. Like,
You missed a bit.
yeah, I mean, I do it myself because that's one of my grooming things where I take the moment for myself. And even
Mm.
when I'm actually like shaving and I do the lines and everything, I actually put my phone on DND, and I have
Do you?
music on, and it's like my own moment as well. And it really doesn't matter what happens outside of my bathroom at that moment because it's just me, the music, and shaving. I'm actually very very fast. It helps when you're Arab and you have a beard from when you were like 7 years old, so you have a lot of practice.
Yeah, you got quite sort of
Um,
coarse hair, quite thick.
yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm not a big fan
Mm.
of beard oils that makes it look greasy and everything, so I just like to keep
Mm.
it neat as well.
Me neither.
But I think it's quite important. Like I don't like when people are, it's up to each and everyone, but I'm not a big fan with me when my like people who have like hair all the way up. I just like to keep it clean.
Yeah.
And then I shave with a normal like razor as well. So I just flip it and I take care of everything myself. Then for my hair, I love hair and I love hair products, but I've been using for the last I would say 20 years Kevin Murphy.
Oh yeah, it's
Kevin
good.
Murphy and there's two brands that I really actually three brands. I'm not gonna lie to you. One is a serum that treats your hair, which is K18 that I use from time to time.
Yeah,
Then I absolutely love Kevin Murphy. All their shampoos, conditioners, even
it's
like the
really good
hairspray. I
stuff.
just use a little bit of hairspray and I'm actually good. And then just a little bit of wax on top of it, literally like this much. Like I don't
Yeah.
do. just
And will
like
that
good
hold
super
in
glue.
the humidity for that? Does that
That's
stay
exactly
good?
why. Like I
Yeah.
don't like when having like too much gel or wax, and I like my hair
Yeah.
to be able to move, and with that humidity and that just that do overspray. Honestly, I don't know if Kevin, you're listening to this, you're a genius for that spray, do overspray. And then when I go out, I tend to use the perfumes, of course. My perfumes really, really depend on the mood, where I'm going, what I'm doing as well.
Right.
And I don't like things that I like a perfume that welcomes, that says like, "Oh, Forat is coming into the room," without being like, "Oh my God, I'm suffocating." You know what I mean? Fresh, clean, elegant perfumes as well. But really, really
Yeah.
depends on the mood as well. But that's what I do. Evening time, of course, very important to wash your face as well, putting on your skincare as well, brushing your teeth as well.
Mm.
I like to take a lot of showers, which I like. People are like, you shouldn't shower more than twice a day, one a day, But we also have to remember that it's quite hot here as well, and humidity. And
Yeah.
I'm a very active person, sports as well, so it can
Yeah.
happen. I've taken like two, even sometimes three showers a day. But it's just like those moments are for me when I just like calm down
Yeah.
from everything.
Switch off. Oh, I totally get that. Well, that's really interesting, and I think your relationship with fragrance. I wonder if when you're at the stage where you're evaluating new Huali fragrances, do you presumably then you have to be sort of clean of other fragrances so that you know what you're smelling?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I can tell you, 2 days ago we finalized one of the perfumes, and it's actually called the Dusk's Outro. And
Nice.
to tell you about that, I've had, since we met, I've had probably like quite a lot of business trips. I've spent,
Mm.
I would say, probably more time in hotel beds rather than in my own bed. I
Yeah, it
even
seems like it,
looked at,
according to
I
Instagram.
missed
Yeah.
my own shower. You know what I mean? It's like, and I
Yeah.
just hated at one point. I remember like we reached Cannes, man. Cannes is like such a beautiful place and amazing people and meeting. But at that point, I was like, I just want to go home. You know what I mean? And and when I reached home, I started realizing that one of the key things that I absolutely love about the Middle East and Dubai, and my favorite moment is that serenity and that inner peace. And I realized that my favorite time is the golden hour, the twilight hour, which is just before sunset, and
Right.
the dusk. And I just love in this part of the world how that sunlight, especially now that the weather is getting better, like I think it's like 33, 34 degrees today, just for you to know. Um, that hour where the sun is kind of like kissing you and embracing you. And I just love how that sunlight before that sunset hits the palm trees, and the palm trees, because it's not like any other tree, it kind of like waves like slower, and it throws this beautiful shadow where it's just like throwing a dancing shadow. And I've been thinking so much about that since I came home, that I wanted to create a perfume that's surrounding that. So it's a very, it's a perfume that was built based on that story, and that's when we come in with the ingredients. And for me,
And what
this
kind of
perfume
things
has
are in
been
it?
taken. Oh, I think it's like there's a lot of fresh notes. There is also like a lot of orange blossom. There's amber. There's also musk. I need to pull up the sheet because I've been mixing since the past 2 days, like around 10 perfumes. But there's a lot of different like fresher notes, but also
Mm.
that makes it a little bit creamy with a mix between vanilla and praline as well. But maintaining that freshness, it's that freshness
Yeah.
that I want. But the dry down is very ambery and also like vanilla slash praline based as well. And it's a beautiful, it's like two different perfumes in one perfume because of that golden hour, the dusk. And the reason why I call it dusk's outro, because a lot of people pay like attention to music's intro, like how it starts, but not a lot of people
Mm.
pay attention to how the song kind of fades out. And that for me really represents that, just before sunset, how that sun is reaching the sunset and then it fades out. So it's a
Yeah.
beautiful perfume, like two perfumes in one perfume, just gorgeous. But it goes back to what you were saying as well, which is that mixing a lot of perfumes and also staying yourself fit from a creative perspective is very difficult when you have a lot of different things happening.
Yeah.
And I felt a lot of creative fatigue. We have to be honest with it. But even
Mm.
like some business people were like, "But Forat, you promised that this scent would be ready by here." But yeah, I'm like, yes, but how can you have that done when a lot of different business functions, accounting, HR, knocking on your door? I was like, "Hi, did you fill in this report?" And you're like,
Yeah.
and that's, with all the travels, I think that is so important to make sure that you don't get that creative fatigue, and it doesn't go just in my work, it goes in, I think, in everyone's work.
Yeah. And I guess you don't want to get to a stage where you're just doing things robotically or just approving things when they're not right. It's such a personal brand. It's really important. I would imagine you need to feel creatively inspired.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, that's what I mean when you say like the killing routine. If you start doing that one time, I believe that you will start doing it three times. And it's like, I think
Mm,
when you're trying to create like a nice habit, and even some people are like, but why don't you skip the gym today? You can go tomorrow. But yeah, if you skip here, then all of a sudden it just falls apart. But I
yeah.
think that that's one of the key things I remember when I told my team as well, which is that, if you're not 110% confident in this social media post or that message, just don't do it. You know what I mean? And
Mm,
that's what the ethos that we live by. And I think that that's a very clear message that I would give to a lot of people. Even in their personal business, whatever. If you're gonna do something, do it properly and do it wholehearted. Otherwise, make sure that you don't do it, and also make sure that you take the time for yourself to find your inner peace, serenity, tranquility that allows you to perform better, whether it's with your partner, with your kids, with your work, and everything. I think it's quite important that you take that moment for yourself to always, refill and reboot yourself.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I wonder if we can return to. We've talked a lot about Hawali and Middle Eastern perfumery, and I think it feels like there's a really interesting intersection at the moment. And I'm certainly seeing in London. We know there's a big Middle Eastern market of consumers that come to some of the big London department stores, and obviously brands respond to that, and some of the fragrances, will there's a lot more oud around. So it feels like in some ways, some of the Western brands are taking their inspiration and their influence from Middle Eastern perfumery. And I suppose the same is true in reverse, that we talk about Hawali and making sure there's a narrative and a storytelling aspect. So I wonder, you've got such a great perspective on both continents and both sectors. Do you see the two converging? Do you think it's not as useful now to talk about Middle Eastern perfumery and Western or French style perfumery, or do you
I
still
mean,
see very much distinctions between the two?
I see still distinctions, but even though I must say that, I've seen a lot of blurred lines recently.
Yeah,
And for me, whether you have a distinction and whether you have a blurred line, for me, they're absolutely okay, both of them. But for me, the most important thing is that whether you do this way or that way, it just have to have a super authentic story. And I
yeah,
think that that's what's important. For me, I was always just telling my team that, if we launch in Japan one day, I'd love to work with a Japanese tattoo artist, the old-fashioned way that they do it. And for me, that is
yeah.
giving cultural appropriation as well, to that country, and giving them, the respect that they deserve. And even,
Yes.
the pop-up that we had in Selfridges, on purpose within that pop-up, I'm not sure if you noticed, but we actually had florals that are coming from your countryside as well, rather than having the Arabic flowers. And that is
Right.
our way of,
Yeah.
showing that we care about you and respect that
Yeah.
as well. And also it goes into the region as well, where, when we launch in a specific city, we make sure that that stand has something specific that represents that city uniquely as well. And even yesterday, we were talking about, our launches in a country like Iraq, which is my home country as well. That even the gondolas and the design, we looked into old Babylonian text that we can have somewhere just to show that appreciation for that culture,
Yeah.
which is absolutely fine. Giving that culture appropriation. That's what I mean by the authentic storytelling as well. And I think that's why, if you want to go, even as an Arabic brand, if you want to go super French, I really don't mind it as long as you do it in an authentic storytelling way, where the story fits into the ingredients and to the message and to the
Mm.
perfumes, and giving that appreciation to whether it's Toulouse or Paris or Normandy or whatever. If you're going as a French, German, American, you know, Cameroonian brand into the Middle East, but without having done your proper research, without having done your proper appreciation for the culture, it's just gonna look wrong, and you're gonna see as well from your side that it's not gonna fit the story. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And even me, when I met Francois Demachy from Dior, and he was telling me about, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, like Oud Fahan. and it was very, very important for them to understand the culture in that specific location as well before doing it. And that's what I appreciate, and this is what I mean by the authentic storytelling. For me, the brands who are trying to sell a story that they're not part of, that they haven't researched, that they're not
Yeah,
trying to, these are the ones that are going to fade out quite quickly as well. If you don't, I think that you're one of the few blessed, and I wish you all the best as well, and I genuinely wish that. But I think it's very, very important that you really, really tell a proper story as well. Whether you want to be French, made in France for the French consumer, or France for Abu Dhabi, or for whatever, I'm okay with both ways as long as you're not trying to cheat anyone, and more specifically the consumers. Because, Hayden, we have to be very honest with you. I've seen a lot of younger people buying perfumes as well, and niche perfumes. It's not
yeah,
old time where they pay 10, $20, pounds for a perfume. It's like proper money, like 200,
yeah,
300
yeah,
pounds,
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
for perfumes. And whether this, you know, tween, 16, 15-year-old haven't worked for that money, their parents or someone has probably worked quite hard for that money. And to cheat people in that way, based on something that you just did from a business perspective to get money, I don't find it okay, to be honest with you.
Mm,
But if you're able to tell a proper story and people want to buy your perfume for $500 or $1,000, I'm really, really happy for you as well, because I've always said that a perfume can be super expensive at $15 and it can be super cheap at $500. It really, really depends on what you're offering the consumer.
yeah. No, I think that makes so much sense, and we've definitely seen brands that kind of almost seem to add oud fragrances just maybe for the sake of it. But I think you're absolutely right. When there's authenticity and a genuine desire to tell a story and to do it for the right reasons, I think consumers can see that generally, can't they?
Yeah. I mean, more
Yeah.
specifically for our consumers, that people are like, "Oh, Oud, your clients are gonna love this." That was me in business development when I was doing market acquisition. I was like, I mean, you do understand that our clients are very much into. I'm talking like 4 or 5 years ago. They're like, they actually love, the vanilla perfumes of Tom Ford.
Yeah.
They love they love these kind of scents. They love the amber perfume of Dior. They love, this perfume from Chanel. Chanel number five, Sycamore, and like I was like, it's not necessarily just oud. Just
Yeah.
because
And
you
it's a
believe
mistake to
that
stereotype people, isn't it? To assume everyone's this kind of monoculture that likes one thing, because we don't.
exactly,
We're all
and we
different.
don't.
Yeah.
We have our certain occasions. I would say even time of the weather. But it doesn't mean that people, in July in 55 degrees like to wear oud all over. Like, that's not how it works. You know what I mean? So, like I
Yeah.
said, you need to do your research as well, understand a little bit better.
Yeah. When we met in Florence, you were kindly show me the Hawali stand, and I know that there's, as well as the fragrances, there's some beautiful room sprays and incense, and the brand is expanding into other home categories. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about what's coming, and what else is going on in the Hawali world.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have my home spray here. Let me just
They
show
were
you.
so good. I remember them from Florence. It's definitely elevated that whole product line, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. And it's actually a home and textile. By the way, for anyone watching, this wasn't scripted. It's just that I'm in my home and they tend to be here. No, I mean, with our home scents, like just to give you an idea, and the incense as well. This for me was very much of a celebration on the culture at home that we have, but also, incense. I really believe that holistic beauty is going to spread, which means that scents, not just necessarily as personal scents, but even car scents, tablets that you can put in your
Yeah,
laundry, home scents, candles, diffusers. I really believe it's going to like proliferate even more and more across the world. And I wanted to make sure that our incense is also something that goes into, let's say, wellness, and that's why we've collaborated a lot with people from Pilates, yoga, wellness people as well. But you know, I really wanted to tell a story in a new modern way. So, one of the incense that you saw is called Stories by the Door, and Stories by the Door is a very Arabic concept. You remember the story,
I
and us
do.
Arabs,
Yeah,
when we're supposed to say goodbye, we end up talking by the door for another hour. So it's called Stories
a
by the
much
Door.
longer conversation before you leave.
Exactly, but another thing as well is family ties. I love to have Saturday lunch at my brother's home, and he has this huge living room, and he likes to cook as well on Saturdays as well with the kids and everything. And I was just like taking a step back, and in his living room, I saw the kids, certain kids laughing, playing. Some kids were fighting, arguing, and then you could hear someone shouting from the other side while someone was talking, and then the tea was being whatever. And for me, I remember I wrote, like, I had my iPhone. I like to actually write my pen and paper. I wrote, "A whiff of loving arguments turned into forever memories," and I just like wanted to celebrate that as well.
Yeah.
Another thing is also the one about us, and the one about us is actually like an incense. And you know how we have family recipes that your mom got from your grandmother, that goes
Mm.
from whether it's a shepherd's pie or a specific ducks, or chicken or whatever. In this part of the world, the incense heritage, they actually have recipes that goes into those families from
Oh,
generation
do
to
they?
generation. And that's why the one about us is literally a salute, as a sensorial ode to the people who have had the same recipe go into like hundreds of years into generation. And while I was like working on that one, I was actually listening to Janet Jackson, and she says, I think it's like one of the songs with Q-Tip, where he asks, "What's the next one?" The one about us, and then the music starts. I think it's "Got Till It's Gone," if I'm not mistaken. But
Oh,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
just like while I was mixing that, what's the next one? The one about us. I was like, this is the one about us.
I love
But
how
like
music seems to influence you quite a lot.
poetry,
Yeah.
music, cultures, locations, ideas, certain moments as well. But definitely, I think whatever like brings us together, and I think music is such a beautiful
Mm,
tool that brings people together.
totally
Um,
agree.
so what's coming up next as well is that we have this Dusk Outro coming up as well. We have two more perfumes. We have one amazing collaboration that's going to happen, which is really really cool. Super musky perfume, which is a collaboration part of the community that I was telling you about. Then
Great.
we've also been playing quite a lot, and I've been playing quite a lot recently, but I'm not sure it's going to happen in 2025 or later, like with body powders.
Oh,
Um,
really?
but yeah, body powders. We've been playing a lot with even bracelets that can diffuse on your wrist as well. We've been playing a lot with candles as well, but in a new very format where you can personalize your own candle. We've been playing quite a lot, to be very honest with you. But one thing that I realized, Hayden, as well, is that the first thing is that we're introducing Ghawali to a new audience globally who probably never heard about it, and having too much can confuse people. So it's better to
Right.
focus on the right things, on the right story, and also like having your proper story about the brand, and rather than having 55 references, because I know that regular perfume consumers, from our intelligence reports as well, I can smell like 50, 60 perfumes easily without losing track, but a regular perfume consumer might get lost after 4 or 5 scents.
Yeah.
And this whole thing about like, oh, smell the coffee, it's actually a myth.
Yeah,
People
that's
love it,
nonsense, isn't
whatever.
it?
It's
Yeah.
not, you should actually smell like nude skin. But
Yes.
when people are like, oh, do you have coffee? I'm like, yeah, here you go. I'm not going to sit and argue about that. But what's important to mention is that I realize that it's better to introduce the whole brand and not confuse people as well. That's number one. The second thing as well is that not just from a perfume creation, but like I said about the perfection in all the details, and that minimalistic elegance that we try to have. If you're launching too much, I don't believe that maybe the marketing, operations, finance, accounting, HR, whatever. I don't believe that we will be able to put our full focus in what we're trying to do
Yes.
at 110% versus when we are trying to launch so much. And I prefer, let's say, 2, 3 launches at 110% rather than 5 launches at 80%, because it goes back to the fact, as we as a group, I don't want to, like, the whole reason why we did this is the love for the culture. The second thing, I don't want to sit and cheat consumers. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And going back to the cheating on the consumers, us as a brand, when we were based here, certain ingredients, whatever, were banned from IFRA standards globally, but here they're not, and there were going to be. I canceled those perfumes, for an example, even though they were bestsellers, because I didn't believe that the rework of them were actually at 100%. They were at like 90,
Right.
92%. And I think that that's important to mention as well, because that is why we're trying to not innovate way too many different categories at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the third thing, which is more importantly, the fourth thing, if I'm not mistaken, third or fourth, which is more importantly, is that um, we, as Beauty Innovation Chalhoub Group, we have also different brands that we're starting to create as well, and we want to make sure that each one has its own life, without trying to run in different directions at the same time. People always tell me like, "Oh, Ghawali, it's a fragrance brand," and I actually tell them it's actually a scent brand because of the incense, the home, but also the different
Yeah.
ideas that we have. And it's very very important to allow brands, perfumes to have their own character and allow them to have their evolution as well, rather than forcing things into it.
Yeah.
If I play with my product development team on this and that, we can play because it helps us. It feeds the mind as well. But we also have to have an operational, commercial, financial, strategic approach to it as well.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting tension. And in talking to brand founders, I hear this a lot. It strikes me that it must be so difficult to tread that line of innovating, feeding the market that's always wanting newness and new stories. Yet at the same time, as you say, that makes a lot of sense that you want to be clear and concise and edited about what Hawali is to new consumers. And yeah, it must be difficult to sort of work that line of allowing people to experience and buy what there is currently, but at the same time trying to make sure that you're moving forward with new things and bringing new things to the market, and without exhausting the whole team and your own creativity. It's a difficult balance, I would think.
It is a very difficult balance, and to be very honest with you, like other than just the difficult balance, I think we have to be super honest about certain things as well, which is that you know even though we belong to a huge group, our brand is a brand that's a standalone by itself financially as well and everything. So for new people who are creating new brands as well, when you're placing an order, you're paying up front as well. I'm talking
Yeah,
about like younger people, so there's
yeah, yeah,
also a cash situation as well.
yeah. For the raw
You have to be
materials, the
realistic.
glass, and the everything.
Exactly. You pay in advance, and by the time you sell to the distributor and retailer, it might take you a certain month. So there's a cash
Yeah,
liquidity. And honestly, I've seen amazing companies, not necessarily in the beauty industry, but other companies that go bankrupt even though they're selling so well, but because the cash liquidity is an issue. So you
yeah,
have to be careful from that aspect. But other than that as well, I think that staying true to your ethos and also the story. And for me, what I mean by that, Hayden, is that there's like certain trends and scents that tends to like really boom, whether a certain brand or a lifestyle is driving that as well.
yeah.
But if you're just like jumping on the trends as well, by the time you jump on a trend, you actually might be late
You're
and
too
things
late.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Because you know that it takes time to create something things as well, and also with production, unless you own your own factory, and then probably on a different scale. But other than that as well, I've personally, and I'm saying this very openly, had quite a few challenges with that I'm creating a perfume, and this perfume, sometimes you have to think commercially as well, because what good is a perfume if it's only Forat and Hayden who likes it, but I ordered like five
yeah,
thousand bottles, you know,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so what's the point of it as well? So I have to like put myself in a situation and a position sometime where I realize that this perfume, Forat, you absolutely die for it. You could like literally swim in it. But is this a perfume that your Sarah or Ali or Mehdi or Clarence or Clemence would like? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. And more
mm,
specifically, now that I create perfumes, not based on the Middle East and the seasonalities that we have with the heat, the super humid, whatever, da, 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 but also a global audience. And that's the
yeah,
question you need to ask yourself as well when you're trying to innovate and creating newness as well, is that this specific scent that I've just created now is so unique and innovative and amazing. But at the same time, how many out of 100 would actually like this perfume? Maybe only 10, 20. And for example, one of the perfume tests that I did, and I'm going to be super honest with you, Hayden, I think it's one of the most beautiful scents that I've ever created. It was juniper berries, oak moss, ylang ylang, if I'm not mistaken, a hint of Luban to make that freshness very long lasting as well, um, certain fruits, and then musky notes as well. It was like, honestly, I would swim in
you
it,
loved it.
literally.
Yeah,
And when we launched it, we didn't do very well. And I mean, to be honest with you, it was launched as a limited edition. So we had very limited quantities.
yeah,
It didn't do very well initially. And for me, I was like, huh? You know what? Because the feedback that I had gotten was from people who work in the niche industry and the manufacturer as well, and my team, and fragrance experts. And I realized that all of us we tend to look at more the uniqueness, the niche,
Yeah.
and the uniqueness, your niche of a perfume that is so gorgeous, and I smell like no one else. And but what I had not really done was to create a perfume that speaks to the wider masses.
Yeah.
But so you need to find your own balance between newness, uniqueness, and commercially. If you go super commercial, then you smell like everyone else. Let's be honest. And then
Yeah.
someone is going to do a dupe for 10% of your price, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If you go super niche, it's going to be a Hayden who knows about perfumes, and you know what I mean. And
Mm.
that's what I learned quite quick as well. And you have to be very honest about it as well.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But for the name of the podcast is Man in the Mirror, and I'm really interested in your perception of self-image, and as you're getting ready, doing your morning routine, I wonder what you think about the man that looks back at you in the mirror.
I mean, conversation actually yesterday, because being super honest with you, when we launched in Selfridges, and I think that day that I met you, I was in Selfridges, and for anyone who works in fragrances and beauty, being launched in Selfridges is like you won 10 Grammys. You know what I mean?
It's a big
Like,
deal. Yeah.
and I promise you, Hayden, and even my relative who was with me, he just looked at me, and I just looked at the stand, and I didn't show any facial expression. And he was like, "What's wrong with you? You should be like popping 75 champagne bottles." And I didn't know, what I felt at the moment. Then 2 weeks later, we came back with the team, and I could see the excitement of the team. It made me so fulfilled and joyful. And that's one of the things that I discussed yesterday. That when I look at the man in the mirror, and more specifically recently as well, as I'm not 23 anymore. I just turned 34 as well. But when I look in the man in the mirror, first of all, I think that I need to be better in a lot of things. I always believe that, mentality wise, that if your goal is 10 and you've reached 8, your goal should now be 12. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I've always had this mentality to always
Keep
improve, to
striving.
always
Yeah.
do better, keep
Mm.
striving. And I always call it ASAP, always strive and prosper. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it goes from the ASAP mob, that
Mm.
ASAP Rocky and ASAP Yams and all of them. And I really, really believe in that as well. Like, you should always strive and prosper. But when I look in the man in the mirror today, and in the past, I would say a couple of months as well, I've started more to appreciate certain things as well, and allowing myself to be proud of myself, even though
Yeah.
things have not reached the 20 or the 12, because I'm reaching an age as well where I'm seeing, I don't have any kids yet. I'd love to have quite a bunch of kids, but I'm also seeing like my nephews and nieces as well, where, I see them as a great accomplishment as well, seeing them grow as well. And I want to
Mm.
be able to transfer that to younger generation at work, people that I interact with as well, hopefully my
Yes.
kids one day as well, where you should try to celebrate the smaller moments in life as well. Try
Mm.
to celebrate a little bit that you had your own 20 minutes on the couch, not doing anything, just listening to music. Celebrate that your moment of peace could be your meditation, your spiritual journey. Celebrate that it might be me ironing my shirt for 15 minutes. And I think that that's the message that I've been trying to tell myself quite recently when I look into the man in the mirror, that, even though things might not be 100% where you want to be, you should still celebrate the smaller wins, and,
Yes.
give that as well. Because when you start, appreciating yourself more, I feel like you can pour over that love to your work, your colleagues, your friends, your family as well a little bit
Totally
more.
agree. You can spread.
And
You can spread it out, can't you? I think.
exactly. And I think that, with COVID, with the pressure of work, and also the situations, whatever, families being distant, I think it just changed my perception on life a little bit more. And I started really appreciating it. Also comes with age. We have to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm not 22 anymore, but these are the things that sometimes actually to just stand and look, and that's why I'm not trying to do an ad for our upcoming perfume because I don't even know when it's launching. Dusk's Ouch. That is literally celebrating that serenity when you have that
Yeah.
tranquility in yourself. And I think that that's the message that I would say. And also, the man in the mirror might not be perfect, but maybe to someone that you don't even know, you're seen as perfect. People look up to you. And
Yeah.
that's what you try to cherish and count your blessings. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think so. I think that idea of, we talked about just before we came on air, but being grateful for the things that we encounter and the things we get to do in our lives is really important. And I really resonated with what you said about the small wins, and I think it is important to take a moment to appreciate good things that have happened, because I think that you can only build up to bigger things from doing the smaller ones. So that was beautiful.
Yeah,
Finally, for
and
I
just on that point, if I may, and I promise I'm not going
mm,
to talk for too long, but we were talking about like all the trips and you're tired and the the
yeah,
luggage and everything, but like I said, I always wanted to have a job that would allow me to explore the world and see different people without
yeah,
me
it's what
just
you
taking
wanted, wasn't it?
vacations. Exactly. So that's where I sometimes, even when I travel, even though I'm exhausted, I literally still put on my ons and just walk, or my New Balance, and I just walk just to say that that is what you've always dreamt of. So count your blessings and appreciate it, and love the people that love you as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, look, finally, for I always ask my guests what it is that makes them happy and brings them joy. So I wonder what that might be for you.
I think it goes back to what I said when I was at Selfridges, looking at it, even though it's childhood dream and everything, like a fantasy for a lot of people. Seeing that joy with the people that you love made such a huge difference,
Yeah,
and that's what makes me really really happy. Seeing the joy of others, seeing people being proud of you, allowing yourself to be proud of yourself as well, but also the joy of connectivity, speaking to people. And
totally. Yeah,
I'm not gonna be cliche, Hayden, but from the moment that I met you as well, like I absolutely loved how that connection that you had to perfume and music, because as you guys can probably see, like I have the same
yeah,
connectivity as well. And also, there's a very Swedish thing where Sweden people used to say like, I have 5 friends and I'm good. I don't need more than 5 friends. You know what I mean? And for me, I've always been the opposite, where it's like I don't need to have five best friends, but I like, and I'm so proud to say, and I love as well that I have friends that I can call in Los Angeles, New York, Latin America, Europe as well, and Asia. And it's just such a beautiful thing, that connectivity, allowing, you to share a little bit of your life, love with other people, and you also participating in those things.
yeah,
When we started, I mentioned it, is that, my father has 14 siblings, my mom 9. So you can imagine like how much of a big family it is. And, what I absolutely love is going back to, my roots, my heritage, or the simplistic things as well. Because people tend to see as well the big gala, the big event, the big launch, the big party, but sometimes what I genuinely love and what inspires me in life, not just in perfumes, is to sit with perhaps one of my oldest aunts and talk about how simple their life was in the 50s and the 60s, and
yeah,
how they used to, how they felt when, the family got their first TV in 1953. You know what I mean? And these are the things that I absolutely love. And these are the things that I absolutely would love to take with me to my next generation and further generations down the line.
yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot recently too, and the stories from our parents' generation and aunts and uncles, and I've just been thinking about it more, where these people are obviously not going to be around forever, and you say, well, these amazing anecdotes and histories from the 50s and 60s, and yeah, we need to cherish those stories, because those people won't always be around to tell them, and we need to be able to tell the next generation. And yeah, what you said, I couldn't agree more about connectivity, and it's something that I feel very keenly in my job, and it's one of the absolute joys of doing this podcast, is getting to meet all kinds of different people, and sharing this love that we have of fragrance and that whole world. But over the last few years, and I've said many times, it's brought me so much joy to connect with different people, and just find out a little bit about their lives. And that was definitely the case when we met, because I think it just gives me an insight into somebody else's world and background. And of course, everyone's different, but the region that you're in now is not a part of the world I know particularly well. I haven't traveled to that part of the world. It's definitely something I intend to remedy soon. But I just always find it fascinating to hear about people's background and what brought them into the industry, and all of that stuff. As we said, it kind of informs what's ended up in the juice, and what the product is. And I always find that so fascinating. But we can't help but have sort of autobiographical strands in the work that we do, and it's been such a pleasure to hear a bit more about Ghawali, and of course about you, Forat. You know, your background, of this unique background of Iraq, Sweden, the Middle East, and this beautiful brand of Ghawali that I'm going to put lots of information about where people can find out more, of course, on the socials, and some of the fragrances and products that Forat mentioned during our conversation. But I hope we get to see each other in person soon. We were hoping that maybe we could do it together in one room, but I know it's probably the restrictions of my season doing this, and Forat's traveling so much. But I hope we get to see each other in real life again soon, because it's always a real joy to see you, and I enjoy hanging out very much. And thank you so much for your time this morning on Man in the Mirror, and we'll catch up again very soon.
Thank you so much, Hayden. And just before we go, I think we took a little bit longer than expected, but that's what I love about like having a free flowing conversation. You know,
Yeah,
if
we
we
could
do
get
this
into
again,
it.
I promise the viewers I'll be much more short and concise. You know,
No, it's fine.
but that's what I love about like Hayden and your podcast is like I said, I don't look much very much at the questions, but it just feels like a natural thing as well. And having that
Exactly.
connectivity to fragrances allows me to get to know your overall life as well, and that's what I
Yeah,
love about that
yeah,
connectivity.
and we can spin off
Hopefully, we'll
into
do this.
other areas.
Hopefully, we'll do this maybe in Dubai if you come and visit us here, or when I come to
I'd love to.
London. I'd love to.
Yeah,
And other than that, I'd just like to thank everyone who spent, even if you watched this for 5 minutes out of the whole time. I just want to thank everyone. Thank everyone also for the love that we've been receiving as well from all different aspects as well. I truly appreciate it. And like I said, just meeting people, connecting, hearing feedback, constructive feedback is just such a blessing. So thank you so much, Hayden, for having me. This is like
it's
I,
my
I
pleasure.
really enjoy this, by the way, like because it's a
Good.
fragrance
Me
talk
too.
that goes into life as well, and that's what I love about it. So
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I
I think
really
that's
want to
it.
thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, and I think that conversations that I have, it has to involve, we spray our fragrance, but to me that's just a tiny part of it. And I'd love to hear a bit more about people's life and how they got to where they got to. But I think all of that is informed in the product. So thank you for that, and we'll see you again really soon. Take care.
Take care, my friend. Bye bye.